Tonight on Reporting Scotland, as the number of cases of flu doubles in a week, a political row flares over winter pressures on the health service. Tackling the effect of plastic cotton buds on marine life, the government announces plans for a ban.
Can't sleep. Every little bit of noise, I'm waking up.
We meet the documentary maker who spent 7 nights sleeping rough in Glasgow to highlight homelessness.
It's the disconnection from the world. It's like a world within a world. It's like you don't exist.
And later in the programme, Dundee becomes a centre for aspiring ice champions. The latest is a young Scottish figure skater who will be representing Britain at next week's European Championships. Good evening. The First Minister says flu cases are contributing to unprecedented pressure on the health service after the number doubled in a week. Nicola Sturgeon today apologised to an 80-year-old man who waited 3 hours for an ambulance before spending 13 hours on a trolley in a hospital corridor. But during angry exchanges at Holyrood, she defended the government's handling of the NHS. Stephen Godden has more.
For the NHS, a cold winter is generating plenty of political heat. At Holyrood, the case of 80-year-old Tom Wilson used as an example of pressure on the system.
He fell on New Year's Day and lay bleeding for 3 hours and a quarter waiting for an ambulance. Mr. Wilson then spent 13 hours on a trolley in a corridor in A&E before being admitted to a general ward.
Mr. Wilson's son had written to the Health Secretary asking for an explanation, a question now posed to the First Minister.
What I say to Mr Wilson is very simple. I say sorry to Mr Wilson if that was his experience of the health service.
But the current situation is, says Nicola Sturgeon, unprecedented, with flu cases in particular taking their toll. Today, Health Protection Scotland released new figures. In the first week of January, the number of reported cases doubled compared to the previous 7 days. And the new figure is 4 times higher when compared to the same week last year. Scotland's hospitals are dealing with the most serious cases. More than 50 people have been treated in intensive care. 8 people have died. MSPs are united in their praise for staff, but that's where consensus ends.
This SNP government has cut both hospital beds and elderly social care places. So when something like a flu crisis hits, the system breaks down.
Why is it that staff and patients like Mr Wilson, who have to suffer today because of Nicola Sturgeon's failure to do her job over the last 10 years?
Today, A&E doctors in England and Wales have written to the Prime Minister, warning patients are dying in hospital corridors. Scotland, says the First Minister, has avoided the worst extremes.
Flu levels are higher. There's more influenza A in Scotland than in other parts of the UK, which affects elderly people disproportionately. So the pressures are higher, but nevertheless Scotland's NHS remains the best performing NHS anywhere in the United Kingdom.
A national service judged by patients according to their own individual experience. Stephen Godden, Reporting Scotland.
And our political editor, Brian Taylor, is at Holyrood this evening. Brian, how much pressure was there on Nicola Sturgeon today?
She was under considerable pressure, just as it appears the health service is. I mean, politics likes to deal in generalities, big statistics, big complaints, big arguments, big promises, but this drilled down to a single individual case, and that is invidious for ministers to deal with. They can say it's out of sync with the general trend. They can say that efforts are being made to improve the health service as a whole, but when you're confronted, as the First Minister was, with the individual case of an individual patient suffering individual problems, there's only one thing to say, and that's sorry.
On another matter tonight, Brian, political disquiet about civil service minutes, or indeed the lack of them, over the discussions about the Chief Constable's pay, a return to work.
A meeting between the Justice Secretary and the then chair of the Scottish Police Authority. The Justice Secretary, Michael Matheson, had said on the wireless this morning he was content for any note of that meeting to be published. It emerged then that there wasn't a minute of that meeting. That caused a bit of a mini storm here at Holyrood. We now have information from the Scottish Government to the effect that a note was taken. There were civil servants present. They communicated the relevant conclusions of that meeting to colleagues, and those conclusions, that note, if you like, will form part of the information that goes to the Public Audit Committee from the Scottish Government. The issue here appears to be that ministers are constrained in what they can say publicly, because this is an employment matter concerning allegations against Scotland's most senior police officer.
Thank you very much. Brian Taylor there in Holyrood. Tributes have been paid to a Wester Ross teenager who died last week after it's understood she suffered complications with the flu virus. 18-year-old Bethany Walker was airlifted to hospital in Inverness from her home in Applecross. Our Inverness reporter Jackie O'Brien has more. Jackie.
Well, news of this youngster's death, as you can imagine, underlines the true face, the true tragedy behind this flu outbreak. We understand that 18-year-old Bethany Walker had been suffering from the flu virus at home and had taken ill with further complications, and pneumonia had set in. She died at Rigmore Hospital in Inverness on Friday. As you can imagine, this has saddened the close-knit Applecross community where she grew up and where she worked in the local pub in her spare time. And in a moving post this evening, her mother Bethany's mother Heather Teal paid tribute to her daughter and to the health professionals who she said worked to save her. Miss Teal said she was truly devastated and that the bottom had fallen out of her world. Tributes have also been coming in from her local school, Plockton High School, where Bethany spent 6 years. The school described her as a kind, caring, gifted and exceptionally conscientious student who was appointed to deputy head girl in her last year at the school. And we understand that she was due to go on to Aberdeen University to study midwifery later this year.
And briefly, Jackie, has NHS Highland had anything to say?
Well, they won't comment on individual cases, as you can imagine, but they stress that fit and healthy people can usually recover from flu at home, but said people over 65 and those with underlying medical conditions should consider seeing their GP.
Jackie O'Brien, thank you very much. The sale and manufacture of plastic-stemmed cotton buds is to be banned in Scotland under plans announced by the Scottish Government. The move follows concerns about the number being washed up on beaches. It comes on the day the Prime Minister set out her long-term vision for protecting the environment. Our environment correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
They're a common sight on many of our beaches. Plastic sticks from cotton buds often pass through sewage plants and end up in our seas and oceans. For ministers, they're not the most common plastic waste, but with biodegradable ones readily available, they're one of the easiest to fix.
This was a relatively straightforward one that we could do pretty quickly, and we see no reason to delay it. That doesn't mean to say we won't be looking at other things as well.
They have to share the ocean with plastic.
Awareness has grown rapidly because of David Attenborough.
A mother is holding her newborn young.
Some of these scenes extremely distressing.
It's dead.
Politicians are now acting, and this ban on cotton buds is one of a series of measures. Most of the major manufacturers and supermarkets have already swapped to the new paper version. Sainsbury's was the first to do it, but there are still many smaller and discount retailers continuing to stock these plastic versions, and it's those that this ban primarily targets. With a global network of swirling tides and currents, much of the damage has already been done, with plastic washing up on some of our most remote beaches. Campaigners say now is the time to act.
They can cause quite substantial problems to animals. They've been found in the intestinal tract of fulmars, and even one whole cotton bud was found in the stomach of a loggerhead turtle, and this can lead to hunger and extreme cases of starvation.
It's no coincidence the ban's been announced as the Prime Minister launches her 25-year environmental strategy. But this is a devolved policy area, and Scotland is already committed to taking action.
Its goals are simple: clean air, clean and plentiful water, plants and animals which are thriving, and a cleaner, greener country for us all.
And it's not just a bandwagon for politicians. Ullapool has eradicated the plastic straw from all pubs and restaurants, replacing it with a green paper alternative. And it was a move driven by children.
We went out and we took it to all the businesses in Ullapool and just basically gave them a wee pack, and the kids explained it themselves. They went in and did all the groundwork, and the businesses adopted it pretty well. Just before Christmas we managed to remove the last plastic straws from the village.
Expect these to be one of many products to be targeted as the tide begins to turn against our plastic consumption. Kevin Keane reporting Scotland.
And Kevin joins us now from Aberdeen Beach tonight. Kevin, you pointed out there the Prime Minister's set out her long-term plan. How does that compare with the Scottish Government's ambitions?
Well, in many respects, Sally, the Scottish Government is well ahead of the game on this one. They were the first to introduce the 5p charge for carrier bags to all retailers, small and large. South of the border at the moment, that only applies to big supermarkets, and today we heard confirmation that was going to be extended. This deposit return scheme, where you buy a plastic bottle with a drink inside it, you pay a surcharge and you get that back when you take it back, that was proposed here in Scotland first, and again the UK Government followed suit. There are other areas as well where the two governments seem to be seeing eye to eye. There could be some degree of cooperation, and indeed the Prime Minister herself today said that cooperation with the devolved institutions was particularly important if any of this was going to be a success. But you heard our Environment Secretary Rosanna Cunningham there saying that the reason why they've acted now on these cotton buds is because it's relatively easy to achieve. There are other areas that will be much more difficult. I'm thinking, for example, of these nurdles, these little plastic small round things that appear on very many beaches right across the world. Cracking that nut and others will be much more difficult.
Kevin Keane, thank you very much. Police have released CCTV of a man who admitted setting off fireworks in a culpable and reckless manner outside a cathedral in Orkney at the end of December. 48-year-old Norman Wood was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment after the incident in Kirkwall. Police said it had been entirely reckless and it was lucky no one was hurt. Police are investigating the rape of a 16-year-old girl in Renfrewshire in the early hours of New Year's Day. She had stepped outside a house party in Athol Place to say goodbye to a friend. When she was on her own, she was approached by two teenage men, one of whom subjected her to a serious sexual assault. The first man was wearing a green or blue camouflage hooded top. Police are particularly interested in talking to the other man, who wore a dark-coloured jacket, as they think he was with the person responsible.
I mean, just to look into himself and come forward and help us catch the person responsible. This is a serious sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl. It's been a traumatic experience from her. It's going to take a long time to get over, and I'm really keen to arrest the person responsible.
Police are treating a fire at a historic cottage near Dumfries as suspicious. The blaze destroyed part of the roof of the A-listed Cruck Cottage at Torthorald on Tuesday night. Cruck cottages have a unique timber frame design dating from the Middle Ages. The one in Dumfriesshire was built in the 1700s and is thought to be the last surviving one in its original condition in Scotland. Businesses must increase the momentum towards gender equality, according to the First Minister. In a speech this evening, Nicola Sturgeon says the public has become much less tolerant about women being excluded from senior roles, particularly after recent scandals about the harassment of women in the workplace. Figures suggest that progress towards increased numbers of women on company boards slowed during the last year. A 43-year-old man has told a court that he had petrol poured over him while he was tied up, naked, in a dog shed by a man he worked for. John Anderson said a child then lit a lighter beside him. He was giving evidence in the trial of 4 men who face 30 charges between them, including slavery and violence. Katrina Renton was in court.
John Anderson told the court that he had been made homeless in the summer of 1998 and he'd been staying in a hostel that used to be on this site in Glasgow. He said James McPhee offered him casual labouring work, which included monoblocking driveways. Mr McPhee is from a travelling family. John Anderson said he was also given accommodation at this caravan site in Bathgate. He said he wasn't paid regularly, but he was given food. Mr Anderson said that after a couple of months, James McPhee became violent towards him. He said it was whenever he was unhappy, which he said was most of the time. He said he was punched, kicked, beaten with a belt and hit with the handle of a pickaxe. He said he was subjected to violence for all the time he was with him, a period of around 7 years.
He told the court he was scared to leave, but did run away 3 or 4 times. But each time he said James McPhee came and took him back. He said one time after he was brought back, he was put in a tin shed at the Bathgate caravan site. He was told to take his clothes off and was tied up. He said it was winter. The dog was in there with him. In the morning, James McPhee came in with a child.
John Anderson said he was told if he was hungry, he could eat the dog food. He then said that petrol was poured over him from head to toe, and the child was standing holding a lit lighter. He said he was hysterical. He said, "I thought he was going to set fire to me. I pleaded, don't do it. I won't leave again. I've learned my lesson."
He told the court he was left in the shed for 2 days.
After he was released from the shed, he told police that he was dragged around by a belt on his hands and knees like a dog, and that he was only allowed to get up when he kissed James McPhee's feet. Robert McPhee, his sons James and Stephen, and John Miller deny all of the charges against them. The trial here at the High Court in Glasgow continues. Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland.
The broadcasting regulator Ofcom has said the BBC's plans for a new TV channel for Scotland have the potential to harm fair and effective competition. The watchdog said it needed to make a full assessment of the plans before deciding whether to give approval. The new channel is expected to begin broadcasting in the coming autumn.
I think it's inevitable that the audience for this new channel will have to come from somewhere. We imagine that a lot of that audience will come from existing BBC services, but it's almost inevitable that some parts of the audience will come from commercial competitors, basically. The important thing is that we try to limit the impact on those other broadcasters as best we possibly can.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's coming up to 14 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. As the number of cases of flu doubles in a week, a political row flares over winter pressures on the health service. And still to come, the young Scottish figure skater who'll be representing Britain at next week's European Championships. A former resident at a Catholic children's home has told the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry that he wants the nuns who ran the orphanage to be accountable for abusing children. Billy Witcher, who's waived his right to anonymity, lived at Smileham Park in Lanark in the 1950s and 60s. Lisa Summers reports.
Billy Witcher was around 8 years old when he moved to Smileham Park in 1957. He said it was so bad he believed a lifetime in heaven would be better than a few years on earth. He said not all the nuns were bad, but those who inflicted the abuse should admit it.
It's a long time ago, it's 60 years ago, but I'd like to at least see the Catholic Church acknowledging that it happened, you know.
Billy said he found it hard to cope with life when he left Smileham at the age of 15. He said it's affected his relationship with his family.
I've got 2 children, it's helped them understand why I wasn't always there for them, because you do leave situations and where I love my children, I wasn't always there for them. So they pay a price as well, not just myself.
Billy Witcher waived his right to anonymity for the inquiry, as did Anne-Marie Carr, who gave evidence today. Her 6-year-old brother, Sammy Carr, died at the home. Earlier, the inquiry heard he had died from a brain hemorrhage after contracting E. coli, possibly by touching a dead rat. Anne-Marie Carr said that she was regularly beaten at Smileham. She said girls were hit with rosary beads and crucifixes. She said she left Smileham shortly after her brother died and put all memories of the place to the back of her head. She said she didn't want to remember. The Daughters of Charity who ran Smileham Park have apologised for abuse that took place. The inquiry in front of Lady Smith continues. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A documentary maker from Glasgow who spent 7 nights sleeping rough says the authorities aren't doing enough to help people on the streets. James English has struggled with drug addiction and made the film over Christmas to show the reality of rough sleeping. The Scottish Government says it has a homelessness and rough sleeping action group. Katie Hunter reports.
Can't sleep. Every little bit of noise, I'm waking up.
James English had no money, no phone, and relied on strangers during his week sleeping rough. He filmed several homeless people as part of his documentary.
Have you experienced any violence? What kind of stuff happened?
This morning, James was off the street and in the cinema.
Obviously we're doing this documentary to raise awareness on a growing problem that we have in the UK.
He's struggled with drug addiction and wants to highlight how brutal homelessness can be.
The abuse that they take every day, the rapes, the stabbings, people try to urinate on them. That was heartbreaking to hear that.
And what about from your own personal experience, what did you find tough about it?
It's the disconnection from the world. It's like a world within a world. It's like you don't exist.
This afternoon we couldn't find the homeless people who James filmed over Christmas, but there were plenty of others, including this man and his dog Buster.
The council asked me to get rid of my dog to get into a hostel. I was like, sorry, I'm not getting rid of my dog. That's not happening. He's like one of the family, you know, it's like giving away one of your family just to get a bed, and I'm not doing that.
The Scottish Government says the recently formed Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group is looking directly at how we end homelessness and transform the use of temporary accommodation. Barry says he's been homeless on and off since he left care as a child. He wants more hostel beds for rough sleepers. While we were filming, a passer-by abused him.
You fall behind on bills, and you pay one bill, you'll rob another bill. And before you know it, you're behind on too many.
Country does to people like that.
Did you get a lot of that?
No, it's very rare I get that, believe it or not. But hey, that's life.
It's a life James hopes his documentary will highlight. The film ends with some messages from homeless people to the public.
I'll raise my glass to you on this Christmas day.
Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
In football, Hamilton and Ross County have been punished by the Scottish FA for failing to keep their players under control. Hamilton have been fined £2,500 and County £2,000 following this altercation. In addition, Hamilton's Yanis Skondras has been given a 5-match ban for excessive misconduct, including manhandling the referee. The Greek defender's reaction to the ban, translated by teammate Alex Gogic.
He feels happy. The lawyers and judges were acceptable and they were kind to him. He said he didn't even see that it was the ref. He said the ref was behind him. He didn't even see that it was the ref. He said straight away, once he realised, he said sorry to him and the ref accepted it as well.
A young Scottish skater will be helping to fly the flag for Team GB at next week's European Championships in Russia. Natasha Mackay from Dundee is the #1 British ladies figure skater, and she's the latest success to come out of the city. As Andrew Anderson reports, Dundee has become a magnet for aspiring ice champions.
Spinning her way to success, Natasha Mackay polishing her moves ahead of next week's European Championships in Moscow. The 22-year-old from Dundee will be Britain's sole competitor in the ladies' singles figure skating.
I don't feel pressure when I go into these things. I did it last year, so I'm not as nervous as what I was. I'm more excited for this one. I know what to expect and just excited to go now.
Natasha began skating at the age of 7. The last 15 years of training have seen her take numerous titles. She's currently the British ladies' #1.
So if you want to do your flying sit, then flying sit, yeah.
Natasha's on the ice at the Dundee rink early, nearly every morning. She's one of a number of top skaters the city's produced in recent years. Conor Stecklam from Dublin has come here to train, attracted by that growing reputation.
My goal has always been to qualify for the European Championships, and I was really far away from that when I first came, and I've recently just done that. But I also feel a big difference in my skating and just my performance as an athlete as well.
The energy was really good in there. Lots of presentations.
The skaters credit much of their success to their coaches. Debbie Briggs and her husband started coaching at the Dundee Ice Arena nearly 20 years ago. Debbie prefers to give the credit to their young skaters.
They work hard. We're lucky to have them dedicated. The parents are good at bringing them in. They train every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning before school and a couple of nights after school. So they're quite dedicated and willing to put in the work, and the results are paying off. And clear on this turn.
And for Natasha Mackay, she's hoping Beijing and the Winter Olympics will beckon in 4 years' time. Andrew Anderson, reporting Scotland, Dundee.
Timeline's back on BBC Two at 7:30 tonight. Here's Shireen and Glenn.
Tonight, as flu rates double, how to avoid it and what you should do if you get it.
Plus, the volunteers who sit with people in their final hours.
The Borders stunt horse riding team starring in hit shows like Outlander and Game of Thrones.
And she's been branded the Usain Bolt of knitting. We've put her to the test. That's Timeline, 7:30, BBC Two.
But before all that, here's the weather with Kirsty.
Thank you very much, Sally. Good evening to you. Well, it's been a dry day across the board. Mist and fog, though, has been somewhat stubborn to clear from some parts of central and southern Scotland. The best of the sunshine today has been in the west and the north. This evening and tonight, the dry theme continues. Clear spells across much of the North Highlands and Moray, allowing a touch of frost to develop. Otherwise, more in the way of cloud and some patchy mist and fog once again, especially so through southern Scotland. Under clear skies in the north, temperatures will dip to around -5 Celsius, more typically though around 1 to 3 degrees, and there will be a strengthening southerly breeze along western coastal areas and across the Western Isles come the end of the night. Tomorrow again, the emphasis very much on dry conditions. However, there will be a good deal of cloud around. Mist and fog, though, soon dispersing during tomorrow morning. Come tomorrow afternoon, I think skies will brighten somewhat across southern and central Scotland. Some spells of sunshine, perhaps, too, although the best of this will be around the Skye area, the west and northwest Highlands. Strong to gale force south to southeasterly winds along the west coast for the western and northern Isles, too. And thicker cloud for Aberdeenshire tomorrow afternoon will produce the odd spot of drizzle. Highs of around 6 to 8 Celsius around coastal areas, a touch chillier inland. That drizzle will continue to affect parts of the northeast into tomorrow evening, otherwise dry and again some clear spells across the north. For Saturday, a lot of cloud around and some rain working its way into western coastal areas. That rain may just become more persistent during the day across Argyll and Dumfries and Galloway. The best of any brightness and sunshine will be in the north, with strong to gale force winds across the Isles. And then by Sunday, a more vigorous area of low pressure moving in, bringing with it some heavy rain and strong to gale force winds. That's the forecast. Sally.
Thanks very much, Kirstine. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, good evening.